So I wanted to talk today about measuring success and just share how your firms are measuring success. How are you measuring success? What sorts of goals are you looking at? We've been talking obviously with our clients about, updating strategic plans for this year. And man, it's been a doozy, because normally you can look back on historical data and say, okay, this is what we can reasonably expect to see this year. But with the fluctuations of 2020, I think it's like a harder thing to pinpoint. And I've felt a little bit from our clients too, even like a hesitancy in decision making, a hesitancy maybe even in investing in certain areas of the business, just still kind of being uncertain about even what this year is going to look like. So I thought this would be a great time for us to talk through what you all are measuring in your firms, us talking about what our clients are measuring, and then maybe even brainstorm what are some other things that we can utilize to measure success outside of like the traditional, revenue, hours, number of cases or whatever, right? So how can we measure success too outside of a financial sense, to just better understand, our business and whether we're achieving what we want to be achieving? So let's start with, how are you all currently measuring success in your firm? What are you looking at on a regular basis? And as always, the answer might be nothing, and that's okay too, right? Like starting somewhere is always better, right, than making stuff up. So hit me with it. What are you guys measuring? Or what are some of your goals?
Typically, our firm looks at year over year progress on gross revenue. So that's typically what they measure success by. The partners do.
Do you know if there's a specific percentage that they want to hit, growth that they want to hit?
No, I do not.
I should know the answer to that, but I don't either.
And I'm going to say the answer is that probably no.
Just to see that it's increasing maybe, or that it's not at least in decline.
Decline, I would say in decline. Yeah.
Okay. Maintenance or growth year over year revenue.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else? Anyone who's not measuring?
Yeah, there's not a lot of measuring here. I mean, there's a couple of us that do, but I think the bulk of the people are of the opinion that as long as they get money to take home, that they believe meets their needs, that's what it is. Which in part ties into why it's so difficult to get people to want to improve, because they kind of have the opinion it's not broke, don't fix it. Mm-hmm. When we know that. It's not always the case.
So let me ask you this. So when there's a lack of or non-existent organizational set of goals, do you find that individual lawyers themselves might have their own benchmarks? Like it's hard for me to think about lawyers like not having something in their head, just industry ingrained billable hour goal concept, right? Like, like Randy, even for yourself, like, do you have your own set of goals that's like for your book of business?
I used to, I used to track it, pretty closely. And I certainly, there's a couple of us that look at, our own, and it depends on the type of work you're doing. Cause over my career, my type of work has changed.
Sure.
So, you have to, 2020 has resulted in a lot of work that's going to be delayed income and delayed billing.
Sure.
On it. So that's going to skew it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I typically look at what's actually collected. There's a report that I look at that's, I don't necessarily care what people have billed. I want to know what they've collected.
Sure.
And I look at the, their outstanding receivables, because that also indirectly affects, the work they're giving away.
Mhm. That's fair. I have a client that is a mostly plaintiffs practice, PI plaintiffs work, but they do some corporate real estate too. And those billables obviously help a little bit with cash flow. But one of the challenges we were talking about, and I imagine it's a challenge on both sides. So, so Joe does a lot of the defense work, right, on employment, med mal, yada, yada, yada. So it's been really interesting for me than having clients that are on the plaintiff side of this same work and the challenges they've been having with the insurance companies and feeling like the insurance companies are actually utilizing the pandemic as a strategy to elongate and draw out the settlements and closing of cases. Because with courts being sporadically available and open and the backlog of being able to even process cases, that, colliding with not really having to move very fast. It seems like his impression, at least, was that the insurance companies are using this opportunity to try to stretch things out, which obviously means stretching out settlements, means stretching out people getting their pay, which stretches out lawyers getting their pay, which means, we've got these law firms that are struggling with cash flow. Have you guys found like that your metrics or things you're tracking collectability is an example, right? Like, is it harder to collect if you're measuring collectability? If you're measuring your speed at which you move cases along, have you found that to be elongating? Because one of the things he and I talked about measuring, which he had measured in the past, was the average length of time it would take for cases to close on med mal and on PI. Okay, so if it's 12 to 18 months, or it was 12 to 18 months prior to 2020, what's that new number now? Because that, if we're measuring that, now we can better predict, right, going forward. Okay, now if it's not 12 to 18, now it's 18 to 24. Okay, now we know we're not going to realize likely the settlement or the payment of these bills until 6 months further in the future than we would have otherwise. So it helps us better financial model. Have you guys found in your areas of practice any sort of, let's call them outside factors, that have affected your abilities to collect or to bill or to even get the work moving forward or get responses? Because obviously those all affect our abilities to achieve our goals.
Mm-hmm.
I think initially the answer is yes. And it was kind of interesting because it varied based upon insurance carrier. So some insurance carriers in April, May timeframe took the approach of, hey, this is a great opportunity to attempt to settle cases, because from their side of things, plaintiffs' attorneys would want money in hand and realize that this may go on for an extended period of time. It was interesting to see that plaintiffs' PI attorneys were not accepting that as frequently as the insurance carriers would have thought. Mm-hmm. That's one. And then the other component of it too was, since we do a lot of healthcare defense, there was a lot of diversion of capital away from litigation settlements to just the simple PPE things that the healthcare workers need. And then, so yes, there was a delay in payments to, on some of our clients, there was a delay in payments for the financial aspect of things, but it did pick back up and it got back on track once the federal government came to their final determination of what they were going to do, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anybody else seen anything? Mike, have you seen anything slowed down with corporate, like deals going slower, not pushing to close deals by the end of the year? Or was there an increase in speed to close deals or, get contracts signed? Or has it just basically stayed the same without any impact?
Yeah, so most of I think at this point, all of my clients, certainly all of my active clients are actually entrepreneurs, smaller businesses. So I don't get involved in M&A too much. But I think as a whole, that market was kind of really quick to react, right? These are businesses that don't operate on a huge cash reserve anyway.
Right.
They're startups, or they're things that, businesses that go month to month. And so, yeah, there was a slowdown at the beginning when everybody was kind of waiting and seeing, but they're entrepreneurs, they're business owners, they're going to find a way to make it work. So pretty quickly, within a couple of months, maybe, by Q3, certainly by Q4, everybody was kind of back to whatever they could get to be normal. And so, back to reviewing contracts, looking at and even then, certainly early on, I had a lot of clients who were maybe events based, or photographers, that sort of thing.
Oh, sure.
Hey,
Yeah.
can you review my cancellation clause? Can you review this kind of stuff? Make sure,
Yeah.
I can get my money and get paid at least that deposit, and I'm not going to get stuck with nothing. So that kind of kept me going through the first little bit. And then, like I said, by the time the end of the year came around, everybody was kind of the opinion that whatever is going to come is going to come, and they just need to keep doing business.
So I think that's something that's kind of a good point that you said that stood out to me about like something else to measure is whenever practices, there's like a diversity of practices, different kinds of clients, different kinds of work. One of the ideas I always give people is trying to not get too granular, right? Obviously, you can break out every single type of service that you offer, but more high level. So if we know that our average income or revenue per criminal client, for example, is $1,500. I'm joking, obviously, but anyway. And then our average revenue for a divorce client is $8,000. Our average revenue for, fill in the blank, right? A PI client is $6,000. If we have a revenue goal, breaking it down a little bit more granularly can help us better understand how to get to those goals in a more tangible way that we can wrap our arms around. So, for example, if I know I want to do, $50,000 or $100,000 just in a certain type of practice area, or in Mike's case, a certain type of contracts, right? Okay, creation of contracts, creation of operating agreements, creation of confidentiality agreements, whatever that is. If I want $50,000 to come in from that, and I know I typically charge $2,500, okay, well then how many of those do I need to do this year? How many of those do I need to do each quarter to try to get to that number? So it's not so much, because I think where we get stuck as business owners is when our revenue goal is just, okay, we want to make $1 million, or we just want to make more than we made last year. Well, where is that million coming from? Because now we're just dependent on everyone like intrinsically understanding what they need to do, right? Instead of it being communicated. Okay, that means I need this lawyer to bill this much at this rate, this lawyer to bill this much at this rate. And if they're not doing hourly billing, so one example, so for my business, I break it down, my revenue goals down by accounting services, marketing services, and consulting services. So then I can actively see, okay, if I've got recurring revenue within marketing of this much, that means I need to have this much in project work, right? So, I need to be selling more in recurring. Same thing with accounting, same thing with consulting. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to wrap my arms around sales too. So I thought I would just offer that idea, especially if you've got a diversified practice area. But I also think it's hard too when you just have ongoing work, like open corporate clients where you just kind of do what you need to do when they come to you with what they need. You're constantly dependent upon that reaction versus being proactive. But I think there's a way that once you set those goals, then you can start being proactive and saying, okay, if I want to sell 25 operating agreements this year, you can start gauging, I think, or putting your marketing around that too, right? So then you write a couple blogs on operating agreements. You push out a couple e-blasts that are about operating agreements. Start getting some quotes from your clients that have used you for an operating agreement. I'm saying operating agreement, but whatever that is that you want to sell to your clients, right? To try to hit that goal. And it's amazing how once you start talking about that, then you start getting that work coming in the door. We've noticed that for sure. When we'll put out an email about something that we do, and one of our current clients will reply and say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize you did that too." Same thing, right? And obviously in firms where you represent multiple practice areas, and your clients in the divorce area might need estate planning, vice versa. That's the obvious connection, but there's a lot more that are, connected as well. Estate planning, corporate, yada, yada. So that was another idea I wanted to offer, was breaking down goals a little bit more. Not too granular, because sometimes when I say granular, I feel like I get a spreadsheet draft of, 30 to 40 different things to measure. And you'll do that. You'll measure for the first month, and then you won't touch it again until July. And then you'll get remotivated and pull it back out, and then you won't touch it again until December. So that was just another idea I had. Anybody else, Charlotte? Well, how are you measuring your success in your firm?
Well, I basically what I do is I have the number of consults, and then the signing percentage, and then the amount of retainers. That's one of the features that I look at monthly. And then of course revenue after expenses. And then I'm, if I'm trying really hard, I'm sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once here. But the other thing I look at, of course, is year-end stuff. I mean, I'm waiting for the year-end numbers from my accountant to see how 2020 compared, because it was, it was such a tough year. But yeah, I look at stuff on the front end, because I feel like if the front end, you gotta eat the mouse or fill the snake or whatever you say. I really look at the front end, because I know once I can sign them, I know what my amounts are that I'm a divorce lawyer. So what I'm normally going to get from that, and I can multiply it. So I'm really front end focused. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's great. That really answers my question, because I think a lot of people don't actually measure the things that you're measuring. And I do think that they're really important, because if your business starts to slow down, and you might feel it slowing, or you might see it reflected in your income, that's not always an obvious, there's not always an obvious reason. And sometimes it's up in that intake process. And so many people aren't measuring the intake process at all. But whenever you can see month over month, oh, okay, yeah, I had far fewer opportunities or consults or whatever. Why is that, right? Or, man, I felt like I was constantly in consults, and you see, oh yeah, I met with a ton of people, but we just didn't retain it. Why? Or we only retained 25% of our opportunities, but we normally retain 50. Well, why is that? Do we have someone else involved doing consults, and maybe they're not as good at it, or is there something else going on? So no, that's exactly right. You're answering my question perfectly. The other thing that I think I've mentioned in the past that we used to measure was days from call to consult, because we had so many different lawyers doing consultations that we noticed that when their calendars were really busy, when a potential client calls in, they typically are calling because they want to talk to a lawyer like right then, right? We know this, right? And sometimes in some practices, you can do that, right? Solo practice, or you're not like in court very often. And then sometimes that's just nearly impossible, and you have to set up a time. But what we started noticing was that if the client booked a consult farther out, like more than 4 days from when they called, they were more likely to have met with another lawyer during that time frame, and we would have been the second lawyer, and either it would have gotten canceled or we wouldn't retain them. So it was actually better to meet with a client faster, even if it was with a lawyer that's maybe not as good or skilled at the consults. We retained more people, getting them in the door faster than them being with like a good consult lawyer, but it being farther out. Does that make sense? So I think it's fabulous that you're measuring that, and obviously measuring the quantity of retainers coming in is important too, because that's predicting future work. It's predicting the work that you're going to have. So if that starts to slow down, then okay, wait, hold on. Our storehouse might dry up here in a little bit if we're not taking those on. So I think that's great that you're measuring those.
I got to step out for a meeting. If I get done with it, I will step back in.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Have a good day.
Sounds good.
Anything else that you guys are measuring at all that you thought would be pertinent, or maybe you're not measuring it, but you've thought of it before, like, man, we should really be tracking this or setting some goals around it? Nothing? One thing I do this presentation. Well, I do a couple different presentations about kind of on this topic, but one of them is better business practices for lawyers. And one of the things I talk about is measuring, what are some metrics that every law firm should be measuring? And we can send this out as a resource. Actually, I think I did a blog on something like this too, because there's so many things we don't measure that I think we could be that help answer those questions for us as business owners, or give us a glimpse into what could be going wrong, or even making sure something doesn't go wrong. So we already talked about revenue, obviously, profit, average revenue per case, but also by practice area, I think can be really helpful when you've got a diversified practice. We talked about the lead calling. And the other thing is hours outside of billable hours. It sounds silly because people freaking hate measuring their time or putting in time when it's not billable, because it's already annoying putting in billable time, and people just hate putting in their time, right? I mean, it's just abrasive to humanity, I feel like. I don't know one person that's like, oh yeah, I really enjoy putting my time in. It's the one thing when I ask lawyers, what's the thing that you could get rid of? They all say putting in my time. It's like the one thing you can't get away from, right, when you're a lawyer. Administrative hours, non-billable hours start to grow, and especially when you have staff. And you know how this goes when you start hearing your staff say, I just have too much work. It's too much. Or your lawyers, you expect a lawyer to be billing 1,600 hours or whatever that number is, 1,200 hours, and they're not even coming close. And they're saying to you, but I feel like I'm so overwhelmed. Like I've got so much work. But I also don't know why I'm not getting there. And a lot of times that has to do with the non-billable hours, the administrative hours. Like, is there a procedure or a process internally in the firm that's just cumbersome and takes a really long time? Or does it take a really long time to get things reviewed? So there's a lot of sitting around and waiting around. Or you as the business owner, are you spending 10 hours a week on accounting, right? And you would otherwise be spending that time working on value added casework, whether it's fixed fee or whether it's billable. So if you've ever felt as an owner, business owner of your firm, I'm working a ton of hours but not seeing the revenue, or my lawyers are complaining of working too much but it's not reflected in their billables, or my staff are saying they're overworked and they need to add people, but internally that doesn't feel right. Try tracking your admin hours, your non-billable hours, even for like a month, just even tracking it for a month in some general categories. Even you as a person, if you feel like, man, I'm just overworked, I don't have time for my family, and yet I'm not making the money. One of my clients, I love her. She always says, I should have more time or more money, but not a little bit, not both, right? It's like, I should have one or the other and be okay with it. Either I'm making a shit ton of money and I'm cool with it, but I don't have a lot of time, or I'm okay with not making as much, but I've got a lot more time. And right now I have no time and no money. So something is broken there. And really that was the answer, was that so much time was being consumed by firm management, business management, non-billable work. That's what was happening to her as the managing partner, but as also a strong biller, right? The firm really depended on her both billing and running the firm. So track it for a month and see where your time is going. And then you can justify making some changes. The other thing
that you bring up, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
And I've got to be careful here because some of this has client stuff on it, but I did exactly that a number of years ago. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, cool. Wow, look at that. That's fancy, Joe.
Well, it was, I tried to track the total number of cases since for a multitude of years the firm had. and be able to present that in a way that translated and showed an increase in volume, but then also the pie chart was something that was the non-billable activities. That was, okay, where's this all this time going? And tracking it very, very specifically. So that's what I did a number of years ago. And it really helped, because then the following year I can go in and target, okay, that is something I'm going to either eliminate or delegate.
That's awesome. That's what I was going to ask, is what actions did it result in for you? It sounds like you were able to like make some changes and shifts.
Yep, absolutely.
We actually got a client last summer because of them sort of doing this exercise, actually, because they were in that same sort of burned out situation, right? Managing partner, got 3-4 lawyers, and I should have more time or more money, and realized they were spending like 15 hours a week on accounting. And like that math is incredibly easy to do when you're a billable resource. So, outsourcing accounting to us was like no brainer, no brainer. I love those, right? Where it's a lot easier to do that math, but, and it has since proven to be true too. So, team, let's make a note. We should do a case study on Spern family law. How much time has Michelle Spern saved by outsourcing her accounting? Getting that idea out of my brain and onto other people so we don't forget about it. One
Sorry.
more. No, you're good. Thanks for sharing that. Because I think it's easy, from a consulting perspective for me to say, oh, you should do this, but it's always better to hear someone who's actually done it and like gained value from it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of work to do it, but I think it paid off in the long run.
Yeah, that's awesome. One other thing I was going to mention about financials that I don't know hardly anybody that measures this, and this is not something you necessarily need to measure ongoing, but if you've got a cash flow issue or a cash crunch, if you always feel like you're just always trying to make payroll sort of thing, you may not have a collection issue. People like to assume, oh, we have a collection issue. It's either a billable issue, a revenue top line issue, or it's a collection issue. Actually, you could just be paying your bills faster than you're collecting. So you can measure, okay, from the time we receive an invoice to pay our expenses, how long does it take us to pay those bills? How many days? Versus how many days does it take our clients to pay us? So if we're paying our bills external, like outward flow of cash, within 15 days, just as an example, but our clients are paying us on average 21, well, then we've got a week, right, in which we've pushed all of our cash out, but we haven't realized it all coming back in. So if you ever feel like you have a cash crunch, it could be that. And where that comes from a lot of times is an accounting department that might just be philosophically obsessed with paying bills the second they come in. Sometimes you've got a bookkeeper who's task driven, who gets it on their desk and just wants to make sure the desk is clear by the end of the day. And they're doing it manually. When you start using a digital software, like bill.com or some sort of online bill pay, even through your bank, then you can set up your bills to be paid the day that they're due. That's a best practice. It's a best practice to set up your bills to be paid by the day that they're due, because then you can predict cash flow. Then you can model. Because now I know I've put all my invoices into the system of what I know I owe, right? And so I know how much cash is going to be flowing out of my account because I know the day they're going to be paid. And then when I send out invoices to my clients and I've got a net 15 or a net 30 or whatever that is, but I know my average is 21 days, right, of my clients to pay me. Well, now I know to expect when to be seeing that money coming in. So that's just kind of a thing that people don't think about usually. But when you have a cash issue, that could be one of the things, instead of assuming that it's revenue or collections, which obviously it could be those as well. So that was another thing. The other thing that I mentioned that's more, it's not financial at all, it's just customer satisfaction. So many firms don't measure the satisfaction of the customer or the clients. And I think as firms grow, when you're a solo practitioner, you have a feel and a bead, right? I mean, how your clients feel about the work that you're doing. When your firm starts to grow, even if you've got one associate or two associates, now you've entrusted this other person to be doing work, and maybe you're overseeing the work, but you may not be on all the communications. So if you've got an associate or even a staff person who's communicating with a client, I think it's a great idea to be measuring, even if it's in a really simple, informal sense, how the clients feel. And we like to use the Net Promoter Score because it's incredibly easy. How willing are you to refer our firm to others? Or the simple question of, are you satisfied with the legal work that's been provided to you? Yes or no? It's really simple. How many yeses do you get? How many no's do you get? And that helps also create a pipeline of reviews. So if they say, yes, I'm really satisfied. Oh, would you be willing to leave us a review online? And if they're no's, then you can kind of cut that off at the pass. And we do like to do those calls like 90 days into their case, depending on how long the cases last, when they close out, and then does it change between 90 days and when the case closes? And sometimes cases don't close, obviously, but we have ongoing client communications. So that's another thing that lawyers don't typically measure, but I really encourage you to do so, especially if you've got staff people or you've got other associates that are doing work for you. So you don't, especially so you don't get caught off guard by a client that might be particularly unhappy about something. That's my input. And I'm happy to point everyone to the blog that I wrote on this with some of those measurements if it gives you some ideas for what to measure this year.
That would be helpful, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, is there anything, does anyone have any thing they wanted to share? But it looks like we probably will wrap up a little early today, which is good. We always like to get time back on our day, right?
Just wanted to say hi, if I could, Jamie. Mark Whittinger, I do a lot of content development for LBO. And I've been on board for a couple of weeks now, so it's been fun. It's a great group. And it's a cool concept what Jamie and the gang are doing. So, and back to your last point, Jamie, it's funny because in my experience, I worked with a couple of large law firms in St. Louis for about 15 years. And a lot of lawyers really don't want to do the feedback. They just want to assume everything's fine, the work is fine, the client's happy. And nobody wants to get any kind of negative feedback from anybody. But in my experience, what's great about it is when a law firm or really anybody that you deal with, you go to Schnucks or wherever, when you get some negative feedback, that's actually an opportunity. Because it's easy to make, you're scoring points when everything's going perfectly, but it's a great opportunity when something's wrong and you come in and you really kill it and really, really address the problem and make things right. That's a fantastic opportunity. And in reality, every one of us, we're all clients and customers of various businesses. And I think we all seem to be pretty reasonable people, even though I just met most of you, but nobody really expects everything to be perfect all the time.
Right.
So the real points are to be made when you find out how does an organization react to a problem. So these are actually great opportunities. And I've seen reviews of different businesses where somebody wrote, well, hey, I had to return this, or I wasn't happy with the service or whatever. I brought it up and boy, they really fixed things in a hurry. So it should be encouraged. I think Jamie's right on the money with that. And I also like the idea that we're doing that you recommend doing just like a couple of quick questions, because nobody wants to take a 400 question survey on client satisfaction. That will quickly lead to dissatisfaction.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Mark, for hopping on. We're really lucky to have Mark join our team because he's been in the industry for a while in marketing and in his business development. So he's adding a lot of value in writing content for our clients and writing content for us. And he's going to be joining us on our collab circles here this year. So
thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for hopping on. I hope that you have a great rest of the week and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Nice to meet you guys.
Sounds great.
Sounds good.